want to talk with you informally this morning a little bit about covenant. I think it appropriate that I begin by saying that I'm old enough that I don't remember lots of things. First of all, I was ordained 60 years ago, not 50. At our house, we have certain rituals and certain things that we don't do anymore. Just one too many times, I have decided that I would like a cup of tea as a nice break from whatever I was doing. And so I would fill the tea kettle and put it on the range and turn on the fire. And then I would wander out into the garden and waiting for the water, of course, to come to a boil. And while in the garden, I would be distracted. And when I came back, there was no water and the enamel was all chipped off the kettle. My wife said, "Your kitchen privileges have just been revoked." That's a personal thing. At the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, I belong to a literary book group that meets and reads, and I love to read, and I can get engrossed in the story, and I read all kinds of things, but when I have finished and I've set that book aside, I forget most of what I read. And if you ask me about certain things, I can't tell you whether I enjoyed the book or whether I didn't enjoy the book. And you might laugh at these foibles, but if you're not there yet, you will be. These personal things are who we are. All of the little things every day combine to create the person we have become. We're the sum total of many influences, experiences, a lot of genetics, peer pressures, social status. And this is our personality that we project into the world. These personal attributes make us. Our personal actions are what set us apart. That's why I'm different from you, and you are different from you. We are all our individual selves, for good or for ill. I was glad to see Sally and Jean Kruger here this morning as greeters. Sally and Jean and I go back more years than we would care to think about. We were fellow members of a little church in South Central Los Angeles when I was director of the community center there, and that's back in the 1960s. Those were days when I worked with people who have become world-renowned. Just then, they were people who agreed with the things that I was doing, and we worked together. I worked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the community as he would come to visit, particularly after the Watts riots of 1965. What could we do? What could we not do? And what we remember of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. today are his personal actions. One day I was asked, was it at all possible for our community center to provide some overnight housing for a group who were coming to the Los Angeles area to do some picketing? They couldn't be sheltered in any of their own churches because they were all Catholics. And the church took sides. And the church decided that the big landowners of California gave more money to the church than the pickers of the crops did. Therefore, they needed to support the landowners. And so as these men and women came to picket for a decent salary for the work they did, we housed Cesar Chavez's farm workers as they made us aware of needs. And for at least a while, we stopped eating lettuce and we didn't eat any grapes. And we remember Cesar Chavez for the personal things that he did. On the other hand, we also remember the zealousness and the personal actions of Adolf Hitler. The actions that destroyed a nation, almost destroyed our world, caused the death of millions, created misery that lingers even today. Our personal actions can be a powerful force for good or for evil. It really is up to us as to what the world will be for our children and grandchildren. Combining similar personal actions and growing them into group action can only make us more powerful. So, as we combine together with like-minded individuals, there emerge political powers and fraternal organizations, denominations, and congregations. When in the case of congregations, we are a part of what is called the free church. That means that we have voluntarily come together to seek spiritual enrichment. We have come together as volunteers creating this congregation. And as volunteers together, we decide our own common path. We call and support our own minister. We provide a free pulpit. And a free pulpit means literally that. In case you didn't know, the person who stands in the pulpit of this church is free to say whatever they want, to express opinions, ideas, new truths for me. We're only limited by being honest and having a sense of integrity. We learn together and we grow together, unburdened by dogmas and laws that can negate our activities and stunt our growth. The creation of a free church is best described as entering into a covenant together. Our covenantal relationship is for mutual strength and growth. The truly free church in this country today is really limited to probably only 3 denominations: the United Church of Christ, the Disciples of Christ, and Unitarian Universalists. We are people of the covenant. And the basis of our covenant is a personal thing. For the group that's gathered here this morning, you have covenanted together by the making of a personal commitment. Let me give some illustrations of what this means. In our morning scripture lessons, we read in the Psalms of the covenant that God entered into with his people. Stern and rigid sort of covenant which said, I will do this if you will do that. We must both be participants for this covenant to be effective. Excuse me. But in Matthew, We find the religious leaders of the day are critical to Jesus about his followers. He's too lenient with them. He lets them get away with avoiding the traditions of the day. And Jesus is quick to respond that they, the religious leaders, can say all the right things. They can go through all the right rituals, but they put no heart into it. They are obeying laws. They are not personally being involved. They really do not understand what covenant is all about. A more common concept of covenant is one that almost 51 years ago I entered into with my wife Nancy. Marriage is a covenant. We covenanted together. We have not taken it lightly. It's been good and it's been bad, but it's been together. It's a personal thing. Is the name of Megan Rice familiar to you? If not, I hope it will be. Megan Rice is a nun. Megan Rice is 84 years old. She's facing 3 years in prison because her covenant with God takes the form of being an advocate for peace. And she and 2 companions were charged with trespassing and putting up peace banners at a nuclear weapons plant. The harshness of her sentence lies not in what she did, in the sense of being an advocate of peace, but her sentence was as strong as it was because she embarrassed our government. She trespassed through 3 layers of security in what was considered one of the most impregnable and safe place for these deadly weapons. For Megan Rice, she's willing to take the 3 years because it's a personal thing. How serious are we about our covenant, whether with ourselves, our God, or our church? Your covenant with yourself is a personal thing, and only you can evaluate it. Only you can covenant with God and know how serious you are. And it's the same with your church. Our church is a voluntary gathering of many imperfect individuals. Now, if you're perfect, you can ignore the following things I want to talk about this morning. Now, for the rest of us, we're going to struggle along, making our mistakes, failing, having bad things happen, picking ourselves up, and moving on. We're also going to inspire. We're going to surprise each other with our talents, our joy, always knowing our need for one another. And always, always loving and cherishing each other. It's a very personal thing. Being true to our covenant keeps us together and keeps us here. Our whole identity as a people is bound up in the importance of our place. And our place is right where we are. It's from here we do what we must do. It is from here that we must be what we must be. I know Shirley Nichols would remember the early years of People's Kitchen. Early years. Mary Parker may remember some of those years. People's Kitchen can only be described as one of the tribes of Israel wandering in the wilderness. We served we had made a covenant. And our covenant was that hungry people should always get a hot meal every day of the year. Nobody in San Luis Obispo should be denied a hot meal. That was our covenant, a very simple one. So each day at noon, since what, 1984, we haven't missed a day of serving a hot meal. There was a time when it was often served at a different place every day. And there was a magnificent, miraculous communication system that wherever it was we were going to be, all those hungry people found out and they showed up there. We served meals from the trunks of our cars. We served in the pouring rain. From the parking lot of the First Presbyterian Church, from parks till the city asked us to move. We served from vacant lots and from the porch of Old Mission Church in Mission Plaza. It was the Old Mission Church that was the catalyst for what we have today in the way of homeless facilities. You see, the downtown business people really did not like to see all those homeless people in Mission Plaza. Just think what that did to our tourist business. So they got together and through volunteer efforts and funding, built the Prado Day Center. People's Kitchen has, through all of this, retained its independence. It doesn't, get any money from any governmental agency, just from you. I mentioned this earlier to someone. They said, oh, you had just served this past week. So you know what I'm talking about. You come together, you cook, prepare a meal, you serve it. That meal is important. That meal is important because many of those that you have provided a meal for know that as the only meal they have during the day. And for us, it's a personal thing. Now, this morning finds you, like most Sunday mornings, gathered together in worship. A covenanted community. Agreeing that this is where you want to be. You are here as a bunch of imperfect human beings, except for those of you who are perfect and tuned me out back there a ways. But as human beings, as a gathering of friends and lovers, it's good and it's right that it should be so. Covenanting together is a personal thing. Nobody is forcing you to be here this morning. Perhaps your conscience plays a little role in it. Sometimes, unfortunately, it becomes habit, and we need to guard against that. But for the most part, we are here because for us, this is the right place to be. This is how we want to spend our Sunday mornings. Being together with our friends, our like-minded allies, seeking to do what needs to be done. I praise you as a congregation because you've had your struggles. You are having your struggles. And yet you have remained faithful to the covenant you made. Because in a covenant, you are not bound to a set of rules. You have covenanted to come together seeking spiritual enrichment and growth. You want to be more than you have been. And you are witnesses to the fact that you are growing. As individuals, you have determined that not only is this where you will be, but that you will continue to learn new things, to adapt to new behavior, to be willing to accept the challenge, even as Jesus' disciples, in the face of criticism, were willing to accept the challenge because they personally knew what they were doing was the right thing to do. Your covenant tells you that this is the right place for you to be. We're putting others ahead of ourselves, always doing our best, always acting on the principles of love. Our covenant together is a personal thing. We have made it so, and we will move forward as a people together. Because ultimately, this church is you. Each one of you. It's a very, very personal thing. Amen? And so be it.